Clerk will read.
Assembly number 3080B, calendar 861, Mr. Aubrey, an act to amend the correction law.
An explanation has been requested. Mr. Aubrey.
Certainly, Mr. Speaker and my colleagues, it is actually a time where we can celebrate the evolution of policy in this state. This bill will limit the use of solitary confinement in both the prisons and local jails in the state of New York. Solitary confinement has been identified by the United Nations as torture under the Mandela rules. Most countries, many of our states, have begun the process of eliminating its use. Solitary confinement is essentially locking an individual up for sometimes up to 23 hours a day, allowing them out for 1 hour. Solitary confinement is used in this state as a regular part of the disciplinary process. What this bill does is modifies the ability of the Department of Corrections and the jail system to use that technique. Why was it considered torture? Because to isolate a human being, any human being, away from others for such extended periods of time causes more than just corrective punishment. It causes mental problems. It debilitates. We have seen individuals who, because of their inability to deal with it, are commonly recommitted to solitary confinement, sometimes up to long periods of time, and then released back in our communities. One might ask, why would this particular process be used so extensively? Because, as someone said earlier today, out of sight, out of mind. So individuals who may be.
Mr. Speaker, if we could just ask all the members and staff and guests to please accord the person speaking on the bill their attention and some quiet and some order in the House.
Certainly, Mr. Morelli. Please, members and staff and guests, we are on debate. Try to minimize your noise to a minimum. Thank you. Proceed, Mr. Aubrey.
Right now, 2,900 New York state prisoners are housed in solitary confinement known as SHUs, or special housing units. Inmates in SHUs are locked into their cells 23 hours a day with 1 hour of recreation time in an outdoor cage. They get no phone calls, no personal property, no programming, no religious services, and there are no legal limits to how long they can be kept. Some prisoners have been in SHU for decades. More than 30 states have moved to recent years to reduce their use of solitary. They have worked toward restricting those who goes into solitary confinement, how long they spend there, and create programs to cause a transition from solitary back to the general population. Our bill incorporates components of all three of these approaches.
Mr. Giglio.
On the bill?
On the bill, sir.
I would like to point out, and I think it's important to know, that New York State has already made an agreement with the New York State Civil Liberties Union regarding solitary confinement. That happened in December of 2015 and was implemented on March of 2016. The agreement and the settlement lasts for 5 years. Almost everything that's in this bill is in that agreement. In fact, if you look, this bill was originally written in 2014. It's my guess that they took a lot of it and used it in their lawsuit. So this might have been the template for exactly the agreement we already have, the state of New York has, And the New York Civil Liberties Union will be monitoring this agreement. As I said before, it will last for a total of 5 years. We are now, I believe, into the third one. It is a good agreement. We will learn a lot from it. It will keep everybody protected behind those walls. And I think that we need to allow it to work its way through and see what modifications might be necessary after this agreement is done. But currently, the way this bill is written is already being done. Thank you very much.
Read the last section.
This act shall take effect on the 365th day.
The clerk will record the vote. Mr. Aubrey to explain his vote.
Actually, I wanted to do more, but we won't delay the day. Reform in the prison system always takes the process of either legislative action or judicial action, and sometimes both. Often we have seen a lawsuit in this House over the years and codified the results of that lawsuit, because lawsuits, as was remarked, have a limited time frame, 5 years. 5 years. People have been locked up for 10 and 20 years in these situations. We have no confidence because the executive could have ended this immediately. They could have looked at the history of SHUs and immediately taken the action to stop the process, looked at what's going on in the world and stopped the process. But they haven't, not just this administration, but administrations in the past. Sometimes we as legislators have to step up to the plate and say what is right, and it's not for the term, it is for permanent use. And so what we're doing with this bill is saying to the state, saying to our population, saying to the people who are incarcerated that we have heard you. Many of them have been to see you in your offices who have suffered from this. They have asked for relief for those who they left behind. It is but right and good that we enact this bill into legislation. I remove my request and vote in the affirmative.
Mr. Aubrey in the affirmative. Mr. Weprin to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for excusing me to explain my vote. This bill is a bill that we've been working on in the Corrections Committee for many years. Yes, there was a settlement, but that doesn't have anything to do with codifying in statute restricting solitary confinement when it's inappropriate. As I said, this is something that's been worked on for many years. I want to thank the sponsor for all his good work over these last number of years. We discussed this extensively in the Corrections Committee that I chair, and I'd like to be excused from voting now, and I will cast my vote in the affirmative.
Mr. Weprin in the affirmative. Are there any other votes? Announce the results.
Ayes 83, noes 35.
The bill is passed. Mr. Morelli.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing a brief interruption. I want to take a moment to introduce a guest.